You're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show. If your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you news from the local area and around the world. We aim to bring Salford to the world to Salford. Very fortunate show to be interested in the world's best athletes, sports people across a wide range of different disciplines related to sports, trainers, coaches, psychologists. We've also spoken to some of the most influential people in the field of psychology and related fields as well. Today we have a fascinating guest, which sort of coincides with the Six Nations. A lot of our listeners are passionate about the Six Nations, the rugby. I know I certainly watched the first round, and who better to tell us about their thoughts? Today's guest is former English and British Irish Lions rugby player, car enthusiast, and also ambassador for SOGO. So, Austin Healey, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Hi, after such an amazing bit of some of the people you've spoken to, I was waiting for the but.
Yeah.
I was waiting to say you've spoken to world-class psychologists, thought leaders from around the world.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get me.
No, that's great to speak to you, Austin. Obviously, many of our listeners would have seen you sort of play rugby, that's for sure, and obviously, a great career that you had. And I mean, just your thoughts, Austin, on the Six Nations at the moment. Obviously, not the best of starts for England from a results perspective. I mean, what do you sort of make of it, really? We've sort of seen Italy, decent performance against France, probably the favourites, I suppose. Ireland, I suppose, are strong as well. And what are your thoughts so far on the Six Nations?
Well, obviously, hugely disappointing in terms of the performance from England. Thought they played a bit too good rugby. And the axis between Farrell and Smith clearly doesn't work. You need one or the other, and I think that has to be Farrell. So it's a difficult one for Steve Borthwick. It's almost like he's inherited a long-term lease, and he can't get out of it because there's a bit of historical stuff still carrying over there from the Eddie Jones era. It'll manifest itself where Borthwick wants it to go, but that's going to take time. That's something that he simply hasn't had. And also, he's had a couple of influential injuries just at the wrong time. So, would Tom Curry have missed that tackle that led to the try? I'm not so sure. So, look, it's been a difficult start for Borthwick. So I think we have to give England a little bit of leeway and time to find their feet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of interesting thoughts there. And I suppose in terms of the Six Nations, obviously the World Cup, not too far away in the sense that time goes pretty quick. I mean, things can change in sport obviously pretty quickly. Sort of going forward, do you see England? Obviously, you play at the highest level, and it's like to play in winning teams. Do you see this team maybe mounting a challenge for the World Cup in terms of is it too sort of early to tell? What are your thoughts sort of going forward?
I think anything's possible, isn't it? If Mike Tinder go from Wakefield to being 20th in line to the throne of England, I think anything is possible for anybody. So, whilst it's not the best start, I think if you look back to the 2007 World Cup, England lost their first game 36-0, went on to almost final. Following that game against South Africa in Paris in that first round, I don't think anybody on the planet would have given England a hope of winning the World Cup, but it is possible. If they've got a group that they could get out of as group leaders, and then they've got to beat Australia, which they've just done away from home on 2 occasions. Wales have just beaten them as well, and Italy. So you find yourself suddenly in a semi-final, 2 games away from being the world champions.
Absolutely.
And any side, regardless of their form, can shock people. And I don't care who you're playing. The number of times we've seen it happen, France versus New Zealand in that same competition in 2007. Anything is possible.
No, definitely. That's sort of, inspiring as well, for our listeners in terms of obviously sort of that kind of that sort of sentiment in life as well. I mean, you just never know. You get up and give it a good go. And in terms of yourself, you have a role now with SOGO. Can you tell us our sort of listeners about what that involves, Austin? You're a car enthusiast. I mean, what's the role that you have?
I'm an ambassador for SOGO Mobility. It's a car company, a flexible leasing company that was set up by a good friend of mine called Carl Higgins. And I would just, it makes perfect sense. You can have a car for a month or a van for a month, or you can have it for 3 months or a year, and you get the flexibility without all the deposits, without maintenance charges, without all the other added extras that you normally get in a long-term lease, and you're not tied in. I was sick and tired of having a car for like a year or 2 or 3 years sometimes. And then, you know, after 2 months you sat in it, driving to work, and you're thinking, oh, I've got this car for the next 2 years, and I can't change it, and I'm spending a load of money, and things have got, and technology has got better. I just thought it was a way of losing and locking up money that I didn't want to do. So Carl asked me to get involved. I think it helped being named after a car. I don't think he wanted me for my decidedly average rugby career. But I've always been a car enthusiast. He's got a brilliant business, and they're seeing from the research that they've done that the consumers are changing as well. It's that, you know, a third of people over the next 12 months aren't going to enter a long-term lease, and they're look for more flexibility. And I think people now, in the cost of living, they don't want to tie up big chunk of money. You know, if you're buying a car for £20,000 and you've got to put, let's say you put £6,000 down, then you're going to be hugely environmentally friendly because it's going to be an old one. You could probably make that £6,000 or £10,000 work a lot better for you and gain interest now in the bank if you left it in the bank rather than investing. So
absolutely,
So it doesn't make any sense, and it feels a little bit old-fashioned, really, to go out and buy a car and keep it and let it depreciate. Let yourself take care of all the maintenance, the costs, the risks, and then you sell it and don't lose too much money. I'd rather pass that risk on to someone else.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Obviously, sort of in terms of that sort of short term. I mean, so in your own sort of like thoughts, in terms of, do you sort of see a short term lease as a better option, Austin, than tying yourself into like a long term? Like for the
short term leases gives you flexibility. You're not paying rental costs. If you take everyone more flexible lives now. They're doing different things. No, there's not many people that are going to work 9 to 5. So some days you go, some days you don't.
Absolutely.
Some days you commute, some days you go to the local shop and you do. So things are changing. You know, my career is I work from September to the end of May commentating. So I drive up and down the country from Exeter to Newcastle on the motorways. So I've got a hybrid 4x4. And then when that ends, I probably want something more or something smaller because I only go into my local town or I go to the train station. I don't need long driving in the summer at all. I hardly do any miles at all in June, July and August, and I go on holiday for a bit as well then if I'm lucky. I need that flexibility, and SOGO definitely gives me that flexibility to do what I want and have the car that I want.
Absolutely. And if any of our listeners are sort of interested in knowing more about what SOGO offer, Austin, where can they go? Is there any sort of like website?
Go to sogomobility.co.uk. That's SOGO, and then pick up the phone. There's people, they man the phones. He's Carl. You can tell by the way he dresses, very old-fashioned. And he likes speaking to people, and I don't even think that's old-fashioned. Actually, that's probably the wrong. People like to speak to people when you're doing something like a car. No, absolutely. It sounds really interesting. So the details are there for our listeners, and just sort of like in terms of like the rugby in general. Sort of going back to rugby, Austin in England at the moment. Sort of obviously you played at a time where there was a generation of players that would outstanding generation of players. I mean, where do you sort of see rugby going? And obviously the standard. Has it improved, do you think, in terms of the league standard? Or I know it's a big question and difficult to answer, but where do you actually sort of see rugby going here in terms of the product on the pitch is the best it's ever been. The England-Scotland game was a brilliant spectacle. It had everything in it: individuality, team cohesion, missed tackles, drop kicks, brilliant pieces of skill. So as a product and as a bunch of players skilled, it is never been. People have got a bit of a downer on it, about the welfare of the player. I think the duty of care that is now in place for players is the best it's ever been. And the chat about drop tackle height is a valid conversation. And it's probably a large overreaction from the use of the word in the press release from the RFU. The reality is it's going to be chest and below, and they're just trying to heads away from each other. Concussions only really happen when heads hit heads or heads hit knees. Anywhere in the midriff, you don't get many concussions, if any. So, in general, rugby is still a safe game. It has less concussions than skiing. It has less concussions than boxing. You could argue it's got less concussions than football if you header it all the time. But anyway, that's for the doctors and other people to talk about. In general, what has happened is the players have just earned too much money. And rugby has spent more than it can generate in the hope that it will accelerate into a competitor for football in the UK. It's not going to compete with football in numbers, but it can certainly stand on its own too, because it is a brilliant product and a great day out. Then my family with SOGO, my two youngest daughters, on Sunday to the Italy game. And then I'm taking my two eldest daughters to the Wales game 2 weeks after. So it is family day out. You can have a brilliant time, both at Gallagher Premiership games and also Six Nations.
Absolutely. No, it's sort of definitely echo those sentiments in terms of it's a great game, and we always encourage our listeners to sort of get involved in sports, and obviously rugby it's just a big sport in the UK. And I just want to thank you for your time. Austin's really kind to sort of join us and give us a bit of an insight, an honest insight into the world of rugby as well too, which is fantastic. I'm sure our listeners have sort of enjoyed that, the insight you've given them into the world of rugby and what you're doing at the moment as well with SOGO. So thanks again for your time, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks a lot, and if you need a new car, go to SOGO.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Austin. All the best.